Dear brothers and sisters, it is Good Friday. History comes to a halt. On this day, God allows himself to be crucified, and not out of duty, but out of love. What you are about to hear is not a story. It's not a reconstruction. It is a mystical vision, one of the most shocking and detailed ever given to a human being. It is the vision of the Crucifixion of Jesus, as witnessed through the spiritual eyes of Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, the same vision that inspired Mel Gibson's film The Passion of the Christ. There is nothing allegorical in these words. It is a descent into the abyss of suffering, but also into the abyss of love. Because every nail, every blow, every insult, Jesus accepted them without resistance, knowing they were necessary to save you, me, each one of us. That's why it's important to listen to these words, because we can no longer say, "I didn't know." Because after hearing them, we will no longer wonder why Jesus did all this. The real question will be, how could he love us this much? But first, let us be silent, and let Emmerich's words speak. Prepare yourself, because this is Golgotha.
It had stuck to the wounds of his body and caused him excruciating pain when it was torn off. The deep wound carved into his shoulder by the enormous weight of the cross caused unspeakable suffering. His back and shoulders were lacerated to the bone. His naked body was horribly disfigured, swollen and wounded. Jesus, the very image of sorrow, was laid by the executioners on the bed of his death. After raising his right arm, they placed his hand over the hole carved into the crossbeam and tightly bound it. Then one of the two crucifiers placed his knee on the sacred chest of the Lord to hold his hand open as it contracted in pain, while the other drove a thick, long, sharp-pointed nail into his palm. He then struck heavy hammer blows. The Saviour let out a moan of agony, and his blood sprayed onto the arms of the executioners. I counted the hammer blows, but I have forgotten the number. The mallets used by the executioners were made of iron, shaped somewhat like carpenter's hammers, but larger, cast in one solid piece with the handle. The nails, whose size had made Jesus shudder, were so long that when driven through his hands and feet, they protruded from the back of the cross. After nailing Jesus' right hand, they noticed that his left hand did not reach the hole on the other side. So they tied a rope around his left arm and, bracing their feet against the cross, pulled with all their strength until his hand reached the hole. Jesus suffered indescribably as his arm was completely dislocated. The crucifiers knelt on his arms and chest and drove the nail into his left hand, which immediately burst forth with blood. The cries of pain from the Saviour pierced through the sound of the hammering. The executioners stretched out the Lord's legs, which had curled up due to the violent tension of the arms, and tied them with ropes. Unable to bring his feet to the wooden block intended to support them, they renewed their insults against him. Some suggested drilling new holes in the wood, as moving the block seemed too difficult. They tied Jesus' right leg and pulled it violently until it reached the support, causing terrible strain. They tied his chest and arms so that his hands would not tear away from the nails. Then they placed his left foot over the right and took a nail longer than those used for the hands, driving it through both feet and into the cross. I watched that nail pierce the Lord's feet and the support plank. The nailing of the feet was the cruelest of all, due to the strain it caused to his entire body. Jesus was crucified. It was around noon when the cross was raised with Jesus nailed to it. When the cross was lifted and dropped into its hole, it trembled with the impact. Jesus let out a deep cry of pain. His wounds tore further open, blood flowed more abundantly, and his dislocated bones struck against each other. His head, crowned with thorns, bled profusely. The executioners placed ladders against the cross and removed the ropes that had supported Jesus' holy body during the nailing. This allowed blood to rush back into his limbs, causing him yet more agonizing pain. I looked upon my Lord with tender compassion. His terrible crown of thorns, blood filling his eyes, his half-open mouth, hair and beard soaked in blood, his head drooping on his chest. After fainting under the weight of the crown, he struggled to lift his head. His chest was raised, creating a deep hollow below, his abdomen sunken, his shoulders, elbows, wrists, thighs, and legs all dislocated. His limbs were stretched and the muscles torn to the point that his bones were visible. His holy body was covered in hideous black, blue, and yellow bruises. Blood trickled down from his hands along his arms and flowed from the wound in his sacred feet, soaking the base of the cross. The blood, at first bright red, turned pale and watery. And yet, even so disfigured, the holy body of the Lord resembled a bloodless corpse. At noon, thick reddish clouds covered the sky. By 12:30, what the Jews called the 6th hour, there was a miraculous darkening of the sun. Gradually, the entire sky darkened and turned red. Men and animals alike were seized with terror. Even the Pharisees stared fearfully at the sky. They were so frightened by the reddish darkness that they stopped insulting Jesus. The centurion took the sponge from a soldier's hand, wrung it out, soaked it in pure vinegar, placed it on a hyssop branch at the tip of his spear, and brought it to the Lord's mouth. The final hour was drawing near. Jesus struggled with death like an ordinary man. Cold sweat covered his body, and his chest heaved with increasing intensity. John, beneath the cross, wiped his feet with a cloth. Mary Magdalene, overwhelmed with grief, leaned behind the cross. The Virgin stood between Jesus' cross and that of the good thief, supported by Salome and Mary of Clopas. When the end came, Jesus said, "It is finished." He raised his head and uttered a loud, sweet cry that pierced heaven and earth. "Father, into your hands I commend my spirit." When the Lord bowed his head and gave up his spirit, it was shortly after 3 p.m. I saw his soul descend into the limbo as a luminous figure. John and the holy women fell with their faces to the ground. Everything had been fulfilled. The soul of the Lord had left his holy body. The final cry of the Holy of Holies made the earth tremble, and those who heard it shudder. The rock of Calvary split, and many houses collapsed. The few people still present at Golgotha beat their chests and hurried home. I saw them deeply moved, tearing their garments and covering their heads with dust. John and the holy women rose and lovingly cared for the Virgin. Abinadar, after offering vinegar to the Saviour, was strangely affected. He remained still on his horse, unable to take his eyes off Jesus' holy face crowned with thorns. Even the horse bowed its head, and the centurion loosened its reins. At that moment, the light of grace illuminated him, and he felt transformed. The proud heart of the fierce centurion broke like the rock of Calvary. He threw away his spear, beat his chest, and cried out as a new man, "Blessed be the Almighty Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." This man was truly righteous. He is truly the Son of God. With one final convulsion, Christ's body turned pale and bloodless. His wounds, from which blood had poured in abundance, now stood out as dark marks. Surrendering completely to death, Jesus had lifted his thorn-crowned head and let it fall under the weight of pain. His lips, now livid and drawn, parted slightly and relaxed. His hands, held by the nails, stretched out, as did his arms. His back stiffened along the wood, and his body's weight rested on his feet. His knees bent to one side, and his pierced feet shifted slightly around the nail. Even in this disfigured state, the holy body of the Lord inspired awe and pierced the hearts of men. His sorrowful passion and cruel death on the cross deeply moved many sinners to conversion. Jesus himself had said, "Unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a seed. But if it dies, it bears much fruit."
Dear brothers, we have listened, we have seen, we have wept. Now we can say it. Jesus chose the cross. He did not endure it passively. He could have stopped everything with a single breath, but he chose to stay, nailed, humiliated. Why? Because every hammer blow was to redeem a sin. Every tear was to dry our own. Every drop of blood was the price of love for our salvation. Jesus suffered so much because he loved so much. He didn't want to save us with strength, but with humility. He didn't want to conquer enemies with the sword, but with the cross. And today, your pain, your loneliness, your failures, they have meaning. Because God didn't stay far away. He came. He suffered with you and for you. And now it's up to us. Will we look upon that cross again with indifference, or will we let it change us forever? If these words touched your heart, share them. Help someone discover the love of Christ today. Write in the comments what moved you the most, and subscribe to our channel to keep walking together in faith toward the light of the resurrection. May the Lord bless us all.